Welcome to Michelle's Making. Hope you're ready for coffee, crafts, cookies, and cocktails. Let's get going.
Welcome and welcome back to those of you returning. I really do appreciate it. Today is International Beer Day, Fresh Breath Day. Now, I think that should be a day every day. Root Beer Float Day, Wiggle Your Toes Day, and Water Balloon Day. That might be a great day to wrap up the summer as kids are getting ready to go back to school. But we'll make it a great one. Enjoy the coffee. It's vanilla caramel in the coffee today, so I'm going to enjoy that. We'll make it a great one and get going.
Let's start with some delicious everything but the kitchen sink cookies. For this recipe, you'll need your flour, salt, baking soda, baking powder, cinnamon, vanilla, eggs, butter, brown sugar, and granulated sugar. And also the everything but the kitchen sink part. Begin by creaming your butters, and then you'll add your sugars and your egg and your vanilla. While that's all creaming, you can get your additives ready. And this is truly a cookie base that you can add anything else that you would have in a cookie to it, or everything else. For this recipe, I added oatmeal, crushed pecans, chocolate chips. I had some semi-sweet chocolate chips left over and some white chocolate chips left over. And I also had some caramel bits left over. And I added all of that. I wanted to add coconut, but not everyone in our household likes coconut, so I only added it to half of the recipe. Now, as usual, you're going to scrape down your beater and your bowl occasionally throughout because you want everything to be well blended. Remember to add your flour mixture a little at a time while you're mixing. This allows it to get well incorporated. And of course, you sifted the salt, baking powder, baking soda, and cinnamon into the flour to start with. The complete recipe will be listed in the description box, but in the meanwhile, you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees and line your cookie sheets with parchment paper. This makes it so much easier to get the cookies off the cookie sheet. Once you've got the flour mixture added in and everything is well incorporated, you're done with your base of the cookie mix. Now you're going to start adding your additives. And as I said, I was doing oatmeal, crushed pecans, my chocolate chips, my caramel bits. I did the oatmeal and the pecans with the mixer, and the chocolate chips and caramel bits I folded in by hand. Once everything is well mixed, you'll scoop out a generous tablespoon rounded onto the cookie sheet and place your cookies about 1.5 to 2 inches apart. These will bake about 10 to 12 minutes depending on your oven. Just keep an eye on them until they're a nice golden brown. Next, I added the coconut to the final amount of the cookie dough. Now, I didn't add a lot of coconut, but you can taste it in the cookies, so if you don't like coconut, just omit it entirely. But I continued on scooping these onto the cookie sheet and baking them. And here you can see they're nicely golden brown. And that's it, our everything but the kitchen sink cookies. Our craft today is a Votive Luminaire. For this craft, I used an old 5x7 picture frame that had a nice ornate border, a couple of the arrow signs from Dollar Tree, and 2 of the wooden plaques from Dollar Tree. They come in a pack, I think, of 6 or 8. And they're a little tricky to find at some Dollar Trees. I looked at several before I actually found them. But I began by taking off the hangers. Now on the longer arrow, the hanger was stapled to the back, and on the short one, it was put through a hole. So I did fill the staple holes and the holes on the short one with some of my lightweight spackling, also from Dollar Tree. And when that dried, I gave it a little sanding with my sanding block. You can see here I was working on 4 of the little arrow signs, but I actually decided to only make 2. The next step is to glue the little plaque, the plank or whatever you want to call it, to the bottom of the arrow. So the arrow is standing straight up in the shape of a house. I used my Gorilla wood glue and I propped it up with a paint canister so that it would stay straight while it was drying. After this had dried, I used the arrow to line up on the corner of the picture frame so I could see the size that I needed. The picture frame is going to be the roof on the house. I liked that the frame was ornate and added a little character to the roof of the house, but you could use a plain frame as well. I attached them to the roof of the house using the Gorilla wood glue. And now everything gets a good coating of my Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white. Once this had dried completely, I used a pencil to outline where the windows and the door would be on my house. And once I was happy with the way that looked, I used my permanent Sharpie marker and traced over the windows and doors. Using a round sponge brush, I added a round window to the top, the peak there just below the roof. I just traced around it. But I decided I really didn't like the windows looking so plain, so I decided to put crossbars in them. And I again traced it with my pencil, and once I liked it, I went over it with the Sharpie. Using Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, the black, I gave everything a dry brushing. Now remember, with this technique, you can go as light or as heavy as you like and just have barely any paint on your brush. Just dab it off on the side or on a paper towel and go over it lightly. I went a little heavier on the roof detail and gave it a light coating on everything else. The last step was using my drill and a very small drill bit, and I apologize, I don't know the exact size, but just a tiny drill bit to put a hole in the center of each of the windows. I didn't think that was going to give enough light, so I then added a hole at the end of each of the crossbars. I also placed a hole through each of the doorknobs on the houses. I used my sanding block to sand off the rough edges left by the drill. picked up a couple of battery-powered votive candles at Walmart. I've I think they were $3 or $4. And there you have it, our Votive Luminaire. Now it's time for that adult beverage, a spiced amaretto. For this, you're going to build it in your shaker using amaretto, a spiced rum, and half and half. This drink is served over ice in a rocks glass. Add your liquor, the amaretto and the spiced rum, to your shaker and shake until it's well chilled and well mixed. The half and half is added later on top of the liquors in the rocks glass. As always, the recipe will be in the description box. Next, you'll add the half and half. The only thing left now is to enjoy our spiced amaretto.
Well, folks, thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. I appreciate that. If you haven't already, I hope you'll share with your family and friends and help the channel grow. I really appreciate that. And let's make it a great week. Don't forget to take time to stop and smell the coffee, and I'll see you next Friday.